So, should we just start with a round table? I have a lot to discuss, but yes, we could
Yeah, it's
start
probably a
light.
good idea. If anyone has anything to share.
You can skip me. I have just been working on corp work, so
I can go. I've just been kind of preparing to do more like marketing / like looking for opportunities to use the tool with other people. I just finished adding a tutorial and it's gonna post in a couple places. Yeah, it's basically it. Well, I'm somewhat excited to see where it goes because I've been focusing a lot on like feature work up to this point, and it'll be fun to see if there are good like applications that people are interested in using it for.
I can go next. Life and family are way too much for me, and I'm not even getting my enough work hours in. Since I'm a contractor, and I don't have deadlines. It's hard to work enough hours. I have plenty of work, I just can't find time to do it. So I haven't been working on the project, but I do want to maybe hire a researcher to start looking at topics and putting debates together. I've hired several in the past. It also helps me stay motivated. So if anyone knows anybody that'd be interested in that, that'd be good. Otherwise, I'll just start reaching out in different platforms.
So what skill set are you looking for?
So someone that could build an argument tree, give a topic and say go research ranked choice voting, find actual quotes from both sides of the argument, refine those quotes to be logically defensible instead of hyperbolic.
Right. So somebody who understands already, because I wonder how long it would take to train, a student, cheap student, intern /
Yeah, and also the way I need to do it is also slightly different than even someone who's been trained in society library format.
For example, so you need any way to factor in training time. So you could get
and part of it is also
a student
not
or a
knowing.
fiver.
Yeah, it'd have to be someone who would have like several hours every week for months. It's more of a long-term thing, but very few hours in a week would be nice. But yeah, it'll be something. It's also kind of feeling through because I know that there's some conceptual problems with how the maps are built and Reason Tracker that is different than all the other tools because of the scoring mechanism that I don't even know how to solve yet. So it'll be a kind of a collaborative thing.
I know students who are looking for jobs, but I think this is the on and off thing is not necessarily the best for students.
Yeah.
Sorry, students who just graduated. For current students, I might actually have someone.
Yeah. Other way. So yeah, if anyone hears of anyone that might be interested, especially if they have debate experience, although they may have to unlearn some things. But yeah. Anyways, that's it for me.
Jack, I see you're here.
Carl had a question.
Yeah, just before Mark Antoine, you give your update because I think since you mentioned I'll be long. I was curious who is Culver in the Discord because I found his and Sophistic Steve's interactions like interesting, the discourse, but I didn't recognize. Is that someone who's been on our call?
I had Culver came a few times, and I was actually going to report on some stuff he sent me.
Okay, it's Ian or Ian, or is it Ian? Is the pronunciation?
I don't know. I'm not sure of the pronunciation. I'm terrible with that. But I think it's Ian Culver. Yes.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
He's somebody who fell through rabbit holes and emerged from them, and he became very aware of framing. And he's very interested in, basically Lakofian framing. And because I'm interested in framing, I came at framing from the argumentation scheme angle. You may remember that book that I brandish from time to time. I guess my video is there blurriness? Let me unblur.
It's not too bad. I
Yeah,
can see it.
yeah, that's better. And I'm beginning to, I've been saying frames are fractal, and I'm beginning to come up with a typology of frames. And we had this discussion, but I want to, it's gelling in my brain, so I want to go into that a bit. We spoke about the frames from FrameNet. FrameNet are basically like verbs. John gave an apple to Mary. That's a frame. It's there's a giver, a recipient, and a thing given. So that's a micro frame. And those are about events. They can be about beliefs also, but they're kind of the atoms of claims, atomic claims is how I would put them. And then these argumentation schemes are reasoning frames, and they're saying, given these and these and these premises, this conclusion is believable. And the frame may be valid, generally invalid, and then we get into fallacies, and then we get into some people saying, oh, actually fallacies are heuristics, so they're sometimes valid, sometimes invalid. And this is definitely the approach taken by Walton. Frames have what he calls critical questions, a bit equivalent to Tolman rebuttals, saying this is valid unless tuck, 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 tuck. And here's a list of what could go wrong with that frame. But it is understood that many frames that we describe as fallacies are actually not always fallacies, right? Example from expert opinion is a great example. I mean, well, experts are often right about something, unless you have another expert who contradicts them, unless.
Yeah,
But,
another way to put it is that fallacies are not always incorrect. So all those are fallacies, but fallacies. So it's two ways of looking at the same thing. But I've been trying to think about how to explain that to people because
the fallacy, I think it's called.
Right.
The fallacies are not reliably incorrect. The fallacies are heuristic. I named the work of Angenot, who said actually different epistemic communities have different favorite, he calls them tropes, like argumentation schemes that are known to be in the fallacy catalogs, but are heuristics. But in this community, it will be held as generally true. And then other communities will say, what are you talking about? This is a fallacy. But communities have their favorite tropes. For example, in right-wing circles, slippery slope. If we allow this, then blah, 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 blah. And what is interesting about Walton is he catalogs, like, for example, slippery slope. Well, is the initial change really setting a precedent? Are each of the intermediate steps actually setting precedents? And is the final stage really that bad? So these are all critical questions you can ask about. Would this slippery slope apply? Is the causality chain that well? Like, is the precedent really enabling the next step in the chain? Those are all steps you can ask. And asking those questions are what makes the given usage of a slippery slope argument valid or invalid. But again, sometimes slippery slopes exist. Sometimes arguments ad hominem even is valid in the sense that if the person is consistently lying, it is a reason to be a bit suspicious of their latest assertion. Anywho, so that's all the frame. Now the question is how to give formal shape to that. And I don't have an answer yet. I'm still working on that. But what is clear to me is that clearly the mental frames are built out of, let's call them atomic frames, like the verb-like frames. And there's something else. When Lakoff and all speak of frames, it's another kind of frame altogether. It's the metaphorical frames. Like this can be understood in this broad domain where these other event frames get auto-activated and these other value frames get activated, because that's another thing I didn't mention. Like some frames are value frames. Like if this follows this pattern, it's good. If this frame follows this pattern, it's bad. We associate values with frames. Now, the notion of a metaphorical frame is there's anything else that happens can be associated to one of the frames in this metaphorical frames with the attendant value judgment. But it's a much more diffuse thing. Like when Lakoff speaks about the nurturing parent versus authoritarian parent frames, those are not one situation. It's a set of situations. It's a very broad situation schema, and how to attach a given frame to these broad situation schema is much more loose comparisons. But the notion of interpreting an event, a frame, a basic frame, as an instance of another value-laden metaphorical basic frame or set of a loose set of connected basic frames, that is what Lakoff calls framing. Or before Lakoff, I'm rereading my classics right now, Erving Goffman, frame analysis. This is about these a kind of compendium of techniques people use to set the frame they're using in a situation. Like not necessarily discourse. There's a lot of person-to-person situations, and it's about your presenting what you're doing in a certain way as following a certain frame. You're providing an interpretation context for your actions. And how do you do that? How do you use certain keywords, certain gestures, doesn't have to be linguistic, to establish the frame of what you're doing, or to undermine somebody else trying to frame what you're doing, or undermine how they're framing what they're doing. So he's looking more at the negotiation process that establishes frame in a given situation. Absolutely fascinating. So this came before Lakoff, but I think it's the same kind of frame. I wasn't sure about that. I wanted to check. Are Goffman's frames the same as Lakoff's frame? I think so. But so what's important about a frame is there's the basic description in terms of roles and actors. There's the fact that it may have a value attached to it. It usually has a scope, it's applicable in those situations. And most important, in terms of Walton, it has these weaknesses. You cannot apply this frame if, and those are the critical questions or rebuttals. But also it has, and I think that's really fundamental, these extensions. When you have this frame, it's susceptible to evolve into this other frame, to be reinterpreted as this other frame with further characteristics. And this is really like a Pokemon evolve card. And I think this is really important because how the reframing, I think there are very classic reframing paths that can also be cataloged. Anyway, how do we describe this? Now, Ian Culver was here last month, sorry. And I know let's contact, and I fell in vacation and I didn't have time to contact him. He sent me this very fascinating PDF, which I didn't have time to read. Now I'm reading it. And it's a bit of a jumble of a lot of very interesting stuff. But in particular, there's a reference to something you may know about. Meaning alignment. Let me post in the Zoom, in the Slack. Oh no, we're not using the Slack anymore. Damn it. Let me start Discord and let me put it in the Zoom in the meantime. So it's chat. So this is an article. Oof, no, only once. This is an article about work in for identifying values and doing a kind of value. And I think it's something we may have discussed here before. What are human values? How do we align them? And how do we prioritize them up to a point? So they propose a system. And what's interesting in there is very much a value frame template. Like, how do you define a value as a frame? And what is the template? And it's very much like, in a way, design pattern writing. Yeah, we're writing design patterns as well. Here's a value. Let me actually share screen. You see which page I'm talking about. So, anatomy of a values card. There's the value. There's its context, description, and attentional policies. What should you look at when you're looking at this value? And from there, you get, and here's more value cards, really interesting. And then there's a kind of moral graph about, should you use this or that in this situation? Very fascinating article, which, again, hat tip and kudos to Ian Culver to bring that to our attention. This, by the way, it's going to be perfectly illegible. I think he sent me, so there's extracts from this thing, and he goes into how do we identify, that's his text, obviously. And then he has the frame catalog from Concept Atlas. We discussed that frame catalog. That one seems to be a bit mixed between epistemic and methodological frames, so which may be another category. I'm really curious about that. This is about distributed DHT stuff. And there's something, this is from, this PDF is a bit all over the place, but there's a lot of interesting things in it. This is multicomputation from Stephen Wolfram, this image, the colored one here. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I'm not sure how it has to do with frames, but I think it's interesting to think about it because multicomputation is saying, consider computations that have choice points and consider a computation as if all computation choice points were taken at the same time. And what is the resulting data set where you take all the choice points? When you have a decision, take both. And Wolfram is arguing that he's making that his own way of looking at quantum physics. Fascinating, a bit far, but from my standpoint of social truth, it makes perfect sense. When we're looking at, should we believe this or that? Well, let's see what people believe, and that's obviously taking all the choices with weights, of course. But it's a bit remote for me, but the computational characteristics of multicomputation may be similar to social truth, thinking about that a bit. And something else about genetics I didn't get into yet. So I should send that to the group actually. But this is from Ian. But obviously,
is this like a note stock where he just copy pastes things that he's thinking about?
I don't.
Yeah,
this was very much. This is what I'm thinking about this point. I think it's very much. It's a PDF he sent me.
And how do you parse it? Do you like ask him, or do you like reconstruct wherever it means? Or
I was going to talk to him about it, and it didn't happen because I'm late with other stuff. And I was hoping to talk to him today. I'm feeling a bit bad, and I need to reach out. He's not always around. This what to say, but it's
just curious.
No, no,
He
no, no,
did
no. It's
actually put this in the Discord, and that's what inspired the conversation with Sophistic Steve
okay.
there. So
Excellent.
there's some details, I guess, on it, but I didn't take too much away. I think it's just kind of scattered notes related to frames, and I don't know if there was like a specific goal of all the notes, but
Like a
yeah, it's
snapshot into his brain during a particular thought process. Kind of cool.
I think that's right. But I think basically he's somebody who has experienced frame shift, and that is important for us to understand because frame shift is not easy. And understanding the mind of people who have done frame shift is useful. Captions? Did I ask for captions? Anyway, seems I did. No, I didn't. Thank you. Pocket captions. The other thing I want to say is Felix. I was hoping again Felix would be here. He's been working on identifying fallacies in bits of text. So he wrote basically a ChatGPT prompt. Here's fallacy descriptions. Can you pick fallacies and why they're valid? With pretty interesting results. And Johannes is looking at claim identification. So this is work that is happening on the side. I've been too busy with frame work and with vacation as well, by the way. Eventually was saying, it's been a weird time to work much on open sourcing the parts of Claim Miner that are not owned by Society Library. I've decided I'll restart from scratch, but expect a Claim Miner light open source soon. So that's a thing now.
Claim Miner, like for their I remember Jamie had kind of presented a couple of, or she shared somewhere like a bunch of arguments and like positions that were, I think, generated by AI. Is that
that's claim gen, which is Claim Miner can drive the claim gen process, but claim gen is a distinct thing. So that would not be part of what I'd open source because that's clearly theirs. But what Claim Miner is being basically is a database of documents and with vector database of documents. So it's easy to add documents and say this. And then I'd have to redo some claim extraction, not to use their code base, but Johannes is working on that. And more important, make the crowdsource the deduplication of arguments that are extracted, do an automatic clustering, and okay, where does that fit? So to create a kind of argument network, and then we'll probably apply the global brain algorithm on what's the most convincing pro and con. So that's something we'll work on right now, the claim extraction mostly. We'll get into frames with, I've got my frame format a bit better. But that means there'll be the basic claim database, claim and document database I will extract soonish. So that's my news. I think been through a lot. Questions, comments? I'm curious. Are you thinking about frames at all? Are you thinking about describing frames? Is that something you see as a use case?
Me or all of us?
It's a collective question.
Yeah, I guess I am curious to learn more about frames and just to, I feel like if I saw them more, I might have more ideas of applying them. But at this point, I guess I don't have too much thought into applying them.
Okay, fair enough.
So yeah, I definitely want to see where you're going with that, and I know a lot of the work you're doing will translate to what I'm working on. I'm not there's I guess maybe the short way to say it is I'm not sure exactly how it will all kind of fit together, and I guess I have a suspicion that a frame may be it may not fit, I guess. I'm trying to figure out how to explain what my intuition about that is, but I don't think I could put it to words right now. But there's something about different frames within the same debate or something like that. Yeah. Anyways, so I am looking forward to it. I think I would find it helpful if we had some specific examples, which I know that you're not done with your design yet. But still the term frame has a wide semantic range.
That's what I was saying at the beginning, right? Between the atomic frames and the reasoning frames and the metaphorical frames,
Yeah.
it's a bit messy.
Which you haven't yet. You're still hoping to make something that includes most of that, or have you
Yes.
already like isolated some or thrown some?
It's absolutely my intent to cover all of the cases. For me, they're all frames. They have different characteristics. Like there is a taxonomy of frame types that I'm trying to to elicit. And basically, what we have is the atomic frames. The reasoning is a connecting frame, and the metaphors are a reinterpretation frame, kind of a frame transformation system. So we're taking an atomic frame and we're interpreting it as another atomic frame with a different value judgment attached. And any frame can have a value judgment attached. Maybe that's independent, but atomic frames can have value judgment clearly. Reasoning frames can have value judgment like this is a bad reasoning. But I think, and I don't know if the value judgment is part of the frame or separate, probably separate because it's per community, right? Clearly per community. But the reinterpretation, it's a frame transformation pattern, is an essential part of formalism. Saying, when you see this frame, you might be tempted to reinterpret it as this other frame, to recast it. So recasting is going to be a fundamental feature of the formalism. And it's also wonderful for progressive formalization. I think that often what will happen, and this is a very CDL topic, often what will happen is somebody will come up with a very basic, A causes B frame. And then somebody will say, well, actually, this causality is, and then we'll use a more complex frame with caveats and scope and this and that, and find a way to qualify the causal statement like this is, or, this is a mechanical cause according to this theory in this domain, or this is a cause, this is a final cause in terms of people do this because they want to achieve that. And, that's more a goal, how a goal translates to action. It's not the same kind of causality at all.
So that makes triggers in me thinking that it'd be nice to see some examples. And then I thought, well, we also kind of have a need for some example debates and some example argument trees based on those debates. So maybe it'd be interesting to, like, if I end up finalizing my ranked choice voting debate, it might be interesting to talk about what type of frames are in there or could be applied, and that might be a good example to help us kind of understand the scope of what you're hoping to do and where frames help So that might be interesting.
But one thing, one second. One thing about that is if you look at what Felix has been doing, this is actually a very, very AI friendly task.
Mhm.
Just social protocols, yes. So I want to show you something here. Share desktop 2. So this is Jabal was supposed to be the social protocols conversation tool with the global brain algorithm, but right now they're de-emphasizing that, and they have this. They take these. Can I just look at this one? 2 hours or so? This is text, and then the system detected. Oh, there's 70% chance that this is a false dilemma, 60% it's an appeal to fear. So basically, he got the system to detect certain known fallacies. This is Felix's work, very recent work, and that, as he said, that was very short work. And by the way, you can see it. This is public. And here is a description. And this is basically a prompt saying, well, an abusive element is entity claims premise, E2 claims premise, and E2's characters. So that's guilt by association. Therefore, blah, blah, blah. So these are fallacies. And they've got a prompt saying, does it fit this fallacy? So this is great. I mean, of course, you'll want to check them if it comes from a system from an AI. It's dubious, but being able to get fallacies, like it should be possible to get AI to extract claims, and maybe that's something we should all work on: claim extraction and tree extraction from data.
Yeah, and I agree AI will be very helpful in that. I've struggled to get much useful, although I haven't spent a ton of time on it. The other thought I had was, I'm kind of building these debates and I'm eventually going to make YouTube videos. So it's going to be kind of like debate journalism or science journalism or something like that, where you're going to be looking at public topics and doing explainer videos. But then also there's this thing of like live streaming the working and building of those. So I don't know if people would be interested in sitting down and, on a joint live stream and just take a topic and create an argument tree out of it using AI or manually or whatever.
I'd say for building formal, let's do it by hand. But if we're detecting, like if we're going from data, this is where AI shines.
Yeah.
But if we're building, let's do it by hand.
But does that sound interesting to anyone to publicly? And you could use the tool, so I don't know. I just put that out there. If anyone's interested, they can hit me up. Participating in building debate maps, argument maps together.
It sounds,
You do a
I
lot of
guess,
that, Joel, don't you? Or not in your tool?
yeah, I've got a bunch of different things, I guess, mapped out. They're not exactly debates necessarily, though. It's like kind of putting structure to like problems, not necessarily
Oh, that's right.
like there might be arguments within like, oh, this isn't a problem because but as soon as like you mention like an effect of the problem as an argument, then you just like extract it into the problem structure and say, well, the problem causes this. And then you can have further debates about whether or not it causes that through that structure. And I guess I'm interested in creating more maps. I guess the way I see it is like that feels kind of like just something that takes a lot of grunt work or like Googling and stuff to like find out what people's arguments are. And so I guess I hesitate, like, I guess what's the intent of just like recording that process? Just
Well, I mean, for me, eventually I'll be making the explainer videos and the those live streams would be a perk for people that support on Patreon if they're just like there's like Destiny, a debater, does live streams every day for several hours where he's just going over old debates, or he's been doing that and he has people donating to him the whole time. So people doing this are just doing it more in a rhetorical fashion, and maybe that's much more interesting than what we would be doing, but it's worth a try. So that's my attempt, and it'd be much more interesting with someone else there, but it is very much grunt work. Although some of that can't, I mean, when you go to ChatGPT and said, give me some articles on like ranked choice voting, give me some articles for and against and outline their pros and cons. Half of it was crap, but half of it was real. So it's a lot faster than it used to be. But it still is a lot of groundwork. But then the discussion of how do you take these,
the information that you find and put it into like a debate format, or
yeah, but also it's kind of like it's these two people are writing two different articles with completely different frames, back to what Mercantile was saying. And so they're not directly addressing each other's claims. Sometimes they are, but most of the times they aren't. And so often, so the nuances of like in ranked choice voting, one of the cons is that if you don't rank either the people that are in the final, it does kind of like simulated runoffs. If you didn't rank the two people in the final runoff, then your vote's thrown away. And I'm like, if you're 3 votes in, like if you've done 3 runoffs already and you didn't rank it, it's just like the person didn't vote in the 3rd election. It's not like their votes weren't counted. They didn't vote. But that's not a great claim, because if it had really been happening in 3 different 3 different elections, or 3 different recounts or whatever, I can't think of the right term, they may have chosen to participate depending on the 2 people that ended up being on top. So
That's why ranked voting is better.
Huh?
That's why ranked voting is better.
Yeah, but they do have kind of a point in saying that you say 50% of you get over 50% of the votes, but if a lot of people didn't rank those top 2 people, they actually didn't get 50%. One of them didn't get 50% of all voters who participated in the election because they didn't rank them, and their votes can't be counted towards that person. So it's a nuance on this on the phrasing and using the terms. And it's a lot more interesting than it's a lot less. It's very humbling every time. Which,
oh yeah.
every time you do one, it's like, oh, it's not as clear cut as I thought it was.
That is generally the case, isn't it? That
yeah.
Most yes/no questions you look into, yes, it becomes yes, but, and there's this aspect and there's that aspect.
Yeah, but also I think most of the if it's a question that people are disagreeing on, our brains do not have the computational power to retain all the information. Like I would say if people are arguing about it, there's not a human brain on Earth that can do it alone without.
Well, which is why we're doing mapping.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a more witty way to say that. You're not smart enough to know the answer to that question is the way I tend to say it. And then after they get flustered, it's like, well, no one's brain has enough computational power to know the answer to that.
There's information capacity, right? How many factlets do you have? And how many yeah, there's too much. No. Instead of speaking about brain power, I would speak about you have a finite lifetime to absorb all the relevant information. Nobody in a single lifetime can access all the relevant information for a lot of these debates.
For some of the topics, I think you can.
Some of them.
Before we maybe pursue that a little further, I'm curious, Bentley, about your idea of practicing this on ranked choice voting. So did you have a specific format for that? Do people mind if we talk a little bit about that, or?
So I mean, I'm putting it into Reason Tracker. So my format's my system.
So it would be that pro con of like the purple and the orange.
Yeah. Although if I'm doing it with someone else and they have a system, the thought, then the thought would be we'd either be like putting in a generic thing, but I'd be thinking about putting in a Reason Tracker, or we could both, if we both have systems, and we'd both be putting in our system. And it'd also be interesting to see the contrast between how the two systems work. So that's my thought. I hadn't really thought through it that much. I just keep thinking about doing the video, and I keep thinking, oh, it'd be much more energetic to me to do it with someone rather than do it alone.
I'd be
Because like
interested in
Bill
the
said,
compare contrast for entering into different systems and see how different approaches handle it.
Yeah, I guess I'd also I was thinking of putting rank choice, or I already have like a map of, without much detail, of just a couple different voting systems, I think. But I feel like that's one type of thing that, the voting, the election's coming up in the US, and that's like probably a great topic to get people interested. So yeah.
yeah,
it's-
part of me is like, well, there's no way we're going to change it in this short notice, but also it is on top of mind of people's brain right now, and when they realize that we don't, one of the problems is that ranked choice solves is having such a crappy selection in presidential candidates. Yeah.
Do you want to do
I know,
that next Friday? Like a shared session of putting in each of our tools and then discussing the issues that come up?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be up to it. Dude, what are you thinking about next Friday this time?
I think so. That this like afternoon, like literally after 12 on Fridays tends to be a good time for me.
Oh, you want to go back to more frequent?
Well, this is one of the one-offs.
Yeah.
I'd be potentially open to more frequent, but also this would be more of like a targeted one-off on a Friday.
Do you want to
Sounds good.
spend an hour or two?
I would say 2, because I have a pretty good sense that we're going to get a little distracted and
Yeah, you
talk
won't
through
get very
things.
far in an hour.
Huh?
All right, I will add it to the Discord, and whoever wants to show up can, even if they just
No,
want to make fun of our systems.
no guarantees on my side.
So is this, wait, so has this changed from live stream into meeting, or is it live
Oh,
stream
well,
to
that's a good
meeting?
point. I don't know. If it's like live stream, it would no one's watching my channels yet, so it would just be there for history. And when people go, "Oh, Bentley, you're an idiot. Why did you think of that?" I would point them to our live stream and say, "Well, you can go look for it and figure it out." So it would be, I think it would be, I mean, these are public, so same sort of thing. But yeah, no one would be watching.
I was gonna say we're eventually gonna need Marc Antoine's critiques of how argumentation framing could contribute to the various implementations, but maybe we could report out like the types of things we discovered, and you can tell us how it matches or doesn't match.
I certainly want to look at trying to identify the premise, conclusion, what form of argument is each of the argument nodes in your systems. It would be interesting because then we can start looking at what are the critical questions, what are the possible rebuttals, which is the whole point of going through the pain of identifying frames. Otherwise, why, right? That's just an academic exercise. But there is a payoff, which is identifying critical questions. So yeah, I should look. I may not make it next week, but have fun. I think it's a good. We'll look forward to it, to hearing reports.
We got about 12 minutes in this meeting. Any
Uh,
small topics?
Ready to bolt.
What was the Carl posted this Substack? Did you want to talk about that while we're here, or was it just to drop in?
Sure. I wanted to be curious if anyone's seen that Substack before. I think I found it because one of the articles got to the top of Hacker News, and this researcher, I think he seems kind of like an applied philosopher, if that's a thing, where I think his academic specialty, or he's a associate professor of philosophy, but he, actually like deals with more concrete issues, like not just theoretical. And I guess a couple of his big things are critiquing the fake news hype, where he says that disinformation or fake news is like a relatively small fraction of what's seen online, and what's really interesting are the sort of implications, or the framing choices, or the attention choices of like what's said and what's unsaid, and he thinks that's the more interesting problem. I'm trying to remember some of the other major things he talks about. The link I shared, the one I'm more interested in, but I think he's talked a little bit less about, is how in a political context people frequently look for rationalizations. They're not as interested in facts. They're more interested in, I have a conclusion I'm interested in, and they are interested in finding rationalizations that allow them to claim logical consistency, or like evidentiary support for their presupposed beliefs. And now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing I did watch a really good YouTube interview with this person, and I'd have to look to see who the interviewer was. I wasn't familiar with them. I guess he looks like a dentist who became like a person who interviews in the space of like rationality and critiquing in Portugal. But anyway, I found the interview pretty interesting, and if you're interested in the Substack or like this topic, probably the interview would be interesting to people. Has anyone seen this person before? Or?
Yeah, no.
Cool. Yeah, I'll share the YouTube video too. The thing I have this draft email, but I'm like too embarrassed to send it. So I'm just like, oh, what do I say to this person? I don't even know. But maybe I'll eventually send it. It's in one of these articles, not this one actually, but in another article, he says basically that he was, I think he was in Turkey or somewhere on some sort of lecturing, like a conference, I guess, or a salon. Anyway, one of these things where a bunch of professors maybe, or professors and graduate students get together, and he gave 2 lectures. One of them was on this marketplace of ideas thing, so kind of related to the blog post I shared. But he says in this other article referencing this one, hey, and I mentioned in my lecture a few ideas I have for how to address this problem, where people in political contexts tend to sort of cherry pick rationalizations to achieve their intended outcome. But I don't think he discusses anywhere in his blog or Substack what some of his ideas are, because for any of our systems, and like for Howju, for example, it's concerning to me that people would just get on there and it would become kind of a us versus them, or black and white rationalization market, where people are just looking to find their own things that support them without considering whether there are valid critiques. And I'm curious what his ideas were. Like some of my own ideas are just, if you put the information there, people will naturally, they can't help but look at it. It's like if you say, oh, you're coming here to grab this easy way of saying that what you already think is true, but also I'm going to put some context here and say, oh, there's a bunch of strong evidence that suggests that this is not as well supported. I think some people will look at that versus just grab what they came for and leave. Not everyone, but maybe some.
No, but if only because they disagree with it and will want to contradict it.
Yeah,
How would you
it's too
refute that?
tempting. It's too tempting.
What?
It's too tempting not to look at it and then want to argue it, for at least for some people, for me at least, when I was more of a Redditor.
And what we want is to get people to go through some hurdles if they want to refute it, to say, okay, well, is this a new argument? Is this an already refuted argument? And is this, you know, is it expressed in a way that's sufficiently non-antagonistic so that,
Mhm,
is it civil conversation?
mhm,
Because you can disagree. And the the question of people are looking, I mean, confirmation bias. I mean, I did go through the confirmation bias reasoning in Enigma of Reason, right? That it's a perfectly fine heuristic. Confirmation bias is a perfectly fine heuristic if you're going to iterate, but you're only going to iterate if you feel there's a common goal. So the question of what is the goal of the conversation, and if it's, preserving our tribe versus the other tribe, then no, you're not engaging in good faith. And this is why so many beliefs are essentially shibboleths, right? They're mark of belonging to this group as opposed to that group.
mhm,
And I believe this, hence I'm a member in good standing of this group.
mhm,
And you're not looking for evidence, you're looking for displaying your badge.
mhm,
Uh, the and I think what's really important is getting people, and this is not clear in my head yet, but getting people to identify not with tribes, but with quests, as Jack would put it, right? I'm My entity is somebody who is trying to solve this problem. And if that's your identity, then you may be open to looking at how best to solve this problem.
mhm.
And we need multiple identities as a way also to get to meet different people. But putting identity around, like putting an identity around nation, ethnic group, and so on. I have a friend who's an anthropologist. She worked in with the Iban headhunter in um, Malaysia. And what she told me is, we have a lot of citizenship based on birth. You were born on this land, hence you're a citizen. And we have a lot of citizenship based on blood. You were born from one of ours, so you're a citizen of you're part of our ethnic community group, whatever. And the Iban were interesting in that, of course, there was an Iban nation, but that was pretty broad. People belong to longhouses. It's a longhouse system. And belonging to a longhouse was not about being born there. It was not being born of the people there. It was not being a territory issue. It was about contributing.
Mhm.
You can move there anytime. And once you've contributed enough, then yes, you contribute, hence you belong. Citizenship was based on contribution. Very fascinating notion. Uh, how we think about such things, right?
Mhm.
These are basic categories. Who's your tribe?
Mhm. That's very
Now,
cool.
those were communities, but I think having project-based communities and contribution-based identity belonging to communities is definitely something we should look into as
Mhm.
a way of escaping the tribalism issues. And also forcing people to be part of multiple communities. If you're problem-based, of course, you're just not looking at one single problem in your life. If that's the primary identity marker. That's something worth discussing. Oh my God.
Yeah, I like that vision.
Anywho, that's something we need to proclaim on the sense graph side, because we're trying to be quest centric, and yeah, I belong to the group that's the broader group that's trying to solve this problem. This is a really strong identity marker. Okay, we reached the top of the hour, and
Yep, awesome.
fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to see you all.
Oh,
Ciao,
yeah.
ciao.
See you next week if you make it.
Yeah.
Bye.